First thing we need to do, I've cleared out like everything in our program, like tags, program blocks, everything, okay? So step one, add a new block, and I'll call this, silly process, all right? Because this is a really silly process, what we're going to do here. And it's not giving me the option for graph because I wasn't on function block, okay? I was on function. This has to be a function block. So function block, give it a name. You can call yours anything you want. And I don't know how, just hovering over that changed it, but it needs to be graph. So there we go. Hit OK. We've got our basic little process here. And the first thing I want to do is set up the controls for it. So let's come back into main, and I'm just going to drag my silly process over here and hit OK. Now, this thing is kind of strange how it works. Just out of the box like this, whenever this thing first gets energized right here on the EN, it's immediately going to run, okay? And once it terminates, then anytime I want to run it, I need to run this init sequence, initialize the sequence, okay? So in order to control this, if I just run it right now, I don't want it to run. I don't want it to start automatically. I want to keep control over this thing, and I want to tell it when to start even the first time, and when to run after that. So I've got my block here, and I'm just going to give myself a little bit of a condition right here. So I'm going to put one interlock there. So this will be energize bit. That sounds good. That's going to be the bit that energizes this. And then down here, I'm going to give myself another bit, and this is going to be start bit. So that's going to tell this thing when I want it to start. And then I also need to put a bit right here. I need to put a contact on this init sequence, because after the initial run, this is going to be what we need to switch in order to start this over and over again, okay? So I'm going to put another one here, and that's going to be my init bit, all right? So there we go. I've got 3 bits, and I would really like to just control one bit to make this thing work like all the time. So I'm going to put some logic in here which will do that for us. Not a big deal, but here we go. Bit logic operators. So I want, what happens here? If the start bit is being pushed and not our energized bit, okay? So our energized bit is not yet set up, and whoops, I haven't even defined that yet, so it's going to make me type it out. If start bit and not energized bit, in that case I want you to set, and that we're going to set the energized bit right here. So I'm going to Control C, Control V that, and I'm going to put that on a positive trigger as well, because I only want that to happen one time. So let's give that an ONS1, right click, define tag, and we'll have to put that in global because main does not have a data table. Done. Okay, so when I first push the start bit, if the energized bit is not already energized, then just one time we're going to set it and then be done with it. And from then on, the energized bit will be set, and it'll always be set, so this will never happen again. Otherwise, anytime we're pushing the start bit, we want to just one-shot the init bit, and that will get our process to start over again. So if the start bit is pushed, we want to come down here with a branch and another positive trigger, and we're going to store this on ONS2, and just for one time we're going to assign, and that's going to be our init bit. Okay, and the one other thing we want to look for down here is we want to look for the energize bit to be present. So I'm going to try to drag that down here if it'll let me. There we go. Copy that energize bit and paste it right there. So when I hit the start bit, if the energize bit is already energized, then what's going to happen is we're just going to fire the init bit one time. But if the energize bit is not already energized, then we're going to set it, latch it, and leave it that way. So the first time I push the start button, it will energize this permanently. That's going to start our process the first time. Anytime we want to start it after that, then we're just going to have to trip this for one scan, and that's going to start it in the future. So kind of a complex control for this thing, but that's what it's going to take to get this thing under control the way we want. So let's just go ahead and define our tags now, and I'm just going to slop everything into global memory to make it real easy. At least as easy as it'll let me. It's still going to make me select everything, isn't it? Define tag, yep. Come on, global memory. Even looks like my one shot's already set up somehow. I guess I already defined that one, didn't I? Yeah, okay. So that should be my controls for this process. I should be good on that. I just need to put that stuff into a watch table so I don't forget. So what do we want to control? We want to control the start bit. I don't want to control the energize bit or the init bit. I don't even want to look at those. All I want to do is control that one bit. That's why I created that silly logic in there. So we should be good on that. Now let's jump into our process and let's create some flow. So I'm going to give us like, I don't know, let's say 3 steps here. And then for the third step, let's give ourselves another option. So we've got 2 possible transitions coming out of here. One of those transitions, let's say that will take us back in time to step 2, and the other one will just let us fall right off the face of the earth and end. Okay, so it's not a big, crazy, elaborate process, but this sequence is, basically something like you would probably actually use one day. So now that we've got that, what do we want to do? Well, I want to just set an integer, which is going to tell us what step we're in. And then I want to give us a way to control the transition manually. So, we'll transition when we want to for right now. And we'll embellish on that in the next lecture. So for now, when I come into the step, what I can do is I can set a bit which is going to tell us that this step is active. So I'm going to just set as long as active, and this is step 1, so I'll just call that step 1 active. All right. And that's what will advise us on that. And of course we want that to be global. Define it. Okay, so now we've got a bit that we can look at. I'm going to Control C, come down here to step 2, Control V, paste that whole action in, and I'm just going to change that to be step 2 active. Global bool, done. And I'll Control V, the same thing over here. step 3 active, define tag, and good. Okay, so yeah, we've got that as a global bool. So now I've got something which tells us which step is active. That's a good thing. And now, aside from those bits, I want an integer that's going to tell us that we're in 1, 2, or 3. Now, I don't have a way to set an integer and change the value from inside of an action. So I'm just going to create a new block, and that's going to be a function. And let's just make it a ladder. So keep it real simple. And let's set some values based on those steps being active. So if step 1 is active, and we want to do good programming here, so I will put a trigger on that because I only want it to happen once. This will be my ONS3. Right click, define tag, and you know, since I made this a function, if I want to use one-shots, I'm going to have to put them in global. I should have made this a function block, but I didn't, and I'm too lazy to go back and do it the right way. So let's just make it global, and then who cares? It's going to work the same anyway, right? And then let's pull in here a move. So let's drag that move, and we're going to move a 1 into, and we'll just call this our step int. Okay, so that'll be an int that tells us what our step is, and we know we want that to be global, and we want that to be an int. Define it. Good. And I'm going to need 2 more of those, so I'm just going to, whoops, there we go. I'm going to select all of this, Control C, and I'm just going to paste that onto 2 more rungs. And now we're looking for step 2 to be active on that rung, step 3 to be active on that rung. We need new storage bits for these 2 triggers. So let's just create an ONS4 and a 5. Global bool, we like it. Global bool, we like that too. And then we're always going to be moving into the step int, but we're going to have different values, number 2 and number 3. Okay, and then what happens if we're not in any step? Well, we don't want to leave some random value in there when that step is not active anymore. So let's go ahead and give ourselves 1 more rung, and we're going to make sure that we are not in step 1 active, not in step 2 active, and not step 3 active. And if none of those is active, we're going to take another move block, and we're going to move the value 0 in. Okay, so there we go. Now we've got a simple little block. I just left the name as block 1, which isn't very intuitive, but that block 1 is going to set all of this for us. And you know what? I can rename that block 1, so I'll call it set step int, because that's what we're doing, is we're setting our step integer. Okay, so yay, it's a little bit nicer. We've got a name. And let's go back now into our silly process. And you know, while we're in here, we're going to be setting that step active. And then I also want to call the thing that's going to set our int. So I'm just going to drag that right over here, and that should do it. And that's going to run all the time, but we've got one-shots on the other side, so that's fine. It's not going to be taking an action every time. And I can Control C to copy that action, and I'm just going to paste that into all 3 of these steps as well. So as soon as we get into each step, we've got something that's going to energize a single bit for us. It's going to let that bit de-energize once the step ends, and then each one of these is going to call that function, which is going to set our integer for us. So the only thing we need now is to manage our transitions. For the first one, for our first transition, I'm just going to give ourselves again a bit that we control. So I'm going to say this is transit 1. Let's right click, define tag. That's going to be a global bool. And I'm going to copy this because I want to use the same thing down here on transition 2. So let's just paste that in, and that's going to be transit 2. Define global bool. Come down here to, now we've got these two are linked, so we can see transitions 3 and 4 together. And for transition 4 and transition 3, I want to look at something else. So I'm going to put a normally open contact on 3, and I'm going to put terminate sequence, so term seq. And right click, define. We want that to be global memory bool. And I'm going to look at that same bit for the other transition, but I'm going to use a normally closed contact for that. So basically now I have a switch that I can flip, and if I have term energized, we're going to end the sequence. But if it's not energized, then we're going to keep going round and round in circles between step 2 and step 3. Okay, so now we've got a little bit of flow control on all of this stuff. And you know, what am I forgetting? Anything? The only thing I think I've got left is to put some of this stuff into the watch table. So we want to be looking at our step int. We've got control of our start bit, and we also need to have control of transit 1, transit 2, and our term sequence. So if we've got control of those, we really don't care about much else. But I guess we could look at step 1, step 2, and step 3 active if we wanted to, just for fun. Okay?